Hare Krishna, welcome to the Q&A session. Today is the 14th of August, 2021, and we did a few verses from chapter 2 yesterday in the Bhagavad Gita main class, and we started the topic of the science of the soul, what is known as Atma Jnana or Jnana Yoga. And we will take question answers. I will summarize briefly what we covered, and we will do Q&A and go from there. Before we start, we will recite the Mangalacharan prayers. So I want to share the screen for that and see how that works. Okay, I hope you all can see the screen. Okay, we go to Veda base, Bhagavad Gita, introduction, and the prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarini Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, very nice. So, a quick overview of what all we covered yesterday. Let's see how we want to do this. So, main class 813. Okay. So there were some questions from yesterday. We'll see. If you have questions, please post them in the chat, or you can raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand mechanism, one of the two, so that I can go in that order. I think everybody has the permission to unmute. Yes. So you can also raise your hand, and then you can speak your question as well. I don't see any questions yet. There are some questions from yesterday and one or two questions that came on the form, the contact form. So I will take up those questions if there are no other questions. Just to recap what all we covered very quickly, I'll spend maybe 10 minutes doing a recap. So let me share screen for that. And hopefully this will help. So you can see the Jamboard. Okay. Just very quickly, this is all covered from yesterday. We started the main section of chapter 2. Of course, entire Bhagavad Gita, all sections. I shouldn't say it's the main section, but it's the Jnana Yoga or Atma Jnana section of the Bhagavad Gita, which is chapter 2, verse numbers 11 to 30. And the main topic is the science of the soul. That is the main topic. Where is this? Here. So science of the soul is the main topic that we covered. Then within that, we covered key concepts, which basically is the eternality of the soul. And we talked about presence of the soul, transmigration of the soul from one body to another, especially at the time of death, eternality of the soul, and that goes together with the temporariness of the body. The body is temporary, but the soul within the body is eternal. One thing also I mentioned yesterday is that we will cover a tremendous amount of concepts uh, which are very fundamental to understanding the uh, depth of Jnana Yoga and a lot of the Bhagavad Gita as well. So please pay very careful attention while we discuss these very key concepts. And therefore, we will go slowly initially and then pick up speed later. Then we talked about the benefit, or why do we need to discuss the concept of soul? Because Arjun is saying, I don't want to fight the war. And Lord Krishna is saying that when you kill someone, especially the people you care about, if you have to kill them to preserve dharma, for justice, then you should consider that the body is temporary and the soul is eternal. So you are only killing the body. You are not killing the soul. The soul is always eternal. So that is the situation, or that is the Gyan for Arjuna. However, the Gyan for us is also that we must never give up our duty or our dharma due to bodily considerations. But for us, there is a very, very important learning, which is that from the science of soul, that this life is not it. Our existence spans way beyond this one life. So we must therefore think and plan long term. Even in this life, we plan for the long term. We save money. We take care of our health today so that we can live a long life tomorrow, a healthy life, happy life tomorrow. That is all towards planning for the long term. If we want to not plan for long term, we can just do all kinds of things today. You can eat all kind of unhealthy food, you can do all kind of things, and then you will, that's called short-term thinking. But we don't do that. Similarly, if we understand that our existence is much, much beyond this one life, we should plan even longer term. Therefore, don't do stupid things in this life for which you have to pay the price in the next life. So that is the learning for us from the science of soul. This is a very, very important learning. Another topic we talked about is the concept of Paramatma and Jivatma. There are two souls, two Atmas in our body. Param Atma, which is known as the super or the big soul, the all-knowing, the superior soul, and the Jivatma, which is our own soul. We covered that concept in great detail. And we said that Paramatma is an expansion of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna or Lord Vishnu. And Jivatma is our own existence, our own individual living entity. They are same in quality, but vastly different in quantity. So quality-wise, they are the same. Quantity-wise, they are different, just like a drop of water versus the ocean. So water has the same quality. A drop of water has the same quality as the ocean water, but quantity is just unimaginably different. That is the difference between Jivatma and Paramatma. Paramatma is all aware, all knowing. Jivatma is not all aware, not all knowing. We talked in detail about Advaita and Dvaita philosophy, which also is in the same lines, that Advaita means there are not two souls in the body, there is just one. And that is the incorrect philosophy. There are two souls in the body, which is Dvaita philosophy. and that is Jivatma and Paramatma. And we gave a lot of references from Shastras, from Bhagavad Gita itself, from Srimad Bhagavatam, from many Upanishads, Kathopanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, Shvetashvatara Upanishad, so many places we gave evidences about the validation or the correctness of the Dvaita philosophy. And the Advaita philosophy is the name, it's just a name. Advaita means they are the same in quality. If that is the definition of Advaita, then it is correct. There is no difference between the quality of Jivatma and Paramatma, but there is difference in the quantity. And what people do is that they say, no, it is the same. And that is the incorrectness. That, where did we talk about? Yes, here, slide number 12, we talked about the understanding that the Jivatma can become Paramatma after attaining Jnana. So I am God, I am Paramatma, people say, the Advaitavadis. I am God, I just don't know it. I am Paramatma, I don't know it. And once I know, which means once I get Jnana, then I will realize I will become God, or I will realize that I am God. That is a wrong philosophy. Jivatma can never become Paramatma. So, that was one very strong point that we covered. We also covered a lot about the details of creation, what all exists. We talked about so many universes. All these universes are there in the material world, the sansar. And then there is the spiritual world. And in between, there is Brahma Jyoti or Brahman. There is also a chart I showed, which is present in the Gita PDX folder. On the Gita PDX website, you can access that. We'll make it more obvious. We are constantly updating the website. So anyway, we will make that available. You can go watch yesterday's recording and all those details are there. So we talked about how the entire creation is structured. All the universes are there in the material world. Then there is Brahma Jyoti, and then there is the spiritual world, or the which is the abode or the residence of the Lord, Shri Krishna or Lord Vishnu, which is what we also call as Vaikuntha. So we talked about that. We talked about two levels of liberation, merging into Brahma Jyoti versus, we talked about which one is correct, entering Brahma Jyoti or merging into Brahma Jyoti. We talked about all those things. And we talked about the fact that ultimately, those who say, I become God, or I am God, you are God, we are all God, ultimately, that is nothing but sense gratification. It feels very good to realize or to be told that how great we are, even though we are not. So it is just another form of sense gratification, free sense gratification. You don't even have to go to a bar and drink, pay the money for a peg of alcohol, or you don't even have to go to a any place and get sense gratification. It's free sense gratification. Just you are told you are God, you are the greatest. So it is nothing but just free, what you call, maska, what you call butter up. It's like somebody says, oh, you are such a nice person. You are the best person I have ever met. And you are like, ah, I'm so happy. I'm the best person. So that is just like free maska, free sense gratification. You are God, I am God, we are all God. Hum sab Bhagwan hai. So, and the name given to that is Mayavad philosophy, because it does nothing but promotes Maya, promotes illusion. Maya is illusion. So it promotes illusion. Yes, I'm in bliss, I'm in illusion. मैं भगवान हूँ, and I'll stick my neck in the sand and be happy, and I don't care about reality. Then we talked about, in verse number 2.13, we talked about the concept of reincarnation. So another concept that The body, when the body dies, when the body is destroyed, the soul goes into another body. And that is called reincarnation or migration or transmigration of the soul from one body to another. We also talked about what we said we will talk later, what governs what kind of next body we get. There is no guarantee that the next body will be a human body. It could be the body of any species. That there are 84 lakh or 8,400,000 species of life. It can be, the next body can be in any of those species. This is mentioned in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And we said that we will discuss later what are the criteria, but the criteria we also briefly mentioned is based on the karma and the guna of the jiva. Based on that, you get the next life. We talked about what happens at death. What is the transition from one body to another? How does one go from one body to another? For that, we talked about constitution of our sort of body or our existence. We didn't say body because our constitution consists of the soul as well, which is not the body. But the body part of it is divided into gross body and subtle body. Gross body is something that you can see and touch. Subtle body you cannot see. And we talked about the concept of what constitutes the gross body. It is the gross elements, the fundamental elements: air, earth, air, fire, water, ether, bhumi, aap, anala, vayu, and kha. Subtle body is then constituted of three elements: mind, intelligence, and false ego or ego, man, buddhi, and ahankar. All these eight are material. All these eight are material elements and constitute our body. Out of these, the three are subtle, you cannot see them. The five you can see and touch. So on death, what happens, and I don't know why this picture is so small. On death, don't know what, oh, I can make it big. Where did it go? Anyway, no problem. So I hope you can see. On death, the gross body is destroyed, but the subtle body remains. The subtle body means mind, intelligence, and ego. The three things plus the soul, they go into the new body. And upon liberation, when you get moksha or nirvana or moksha, the gross plus subtle body is destroyed. Only the soul remains, and that goes into the spiritual world. It goes out of the material world. So this diagram kind of puts it in perspective. There is the soul. Then on top of the soul has the subtle body consisting of mind, intelligence, and ego, man, buddhi, ahankar. And then on top of that is the physical or the gross body consisting of these elements: earth, air, water, fire, and ether. On death, this outer portion is destroyed, and only the inner portion, which is consisting of mind, intelligence, and ego, and the soul, transmigrates into another body. But on liberation, even this subtle body is destroyed, and only the soul goes out of the material world. And then it doesn't have to go through the cycle of birth and death. The whole mrityu samsara is left behind. There was a question somebody asked then yesterday, and this is the last slide, how to give up attachments. But we explained that, you cannot give up attachments. It's very hard to give up attachments. And you must replace the attachments with spiritual attachments. It's not about giving up attachments. The whole game or the whole idea, so to say, I shouldn't call it a game. There is no game. Game is kind of conveys a notion that what if I don't want to play the game? So it's not a game. It's a it's in your interest. Otherwise, you can continue to be in this samsara and you will continue to experience happiness, distress, happiness, misery, keep going in cycles of sometimes you are happy, sometimes you are sad. And mostly we are sad. And especially in human life, there is more happiness. In other species of life, there is more suffering. Look at all the cats and dogs that you see and how they get killed on the road and all that. So it's not a very suffering-free life. So in any case, the answer to how to give up attachments it's about material attachments. So give up material attachments and replace them with spiritual attachments. And we said we will cover it in more detail in second chapter, 59th verse, which talks about developing attachments of a higher taste, of a spiritual nature, and replacing our attachments with the higher attachments. So all this we talked about yesterday. Okay, I will pause here and see if there are questions. I don't see anybody raising their hands. So please raise hands if you have questions, and we can go from there, and else we can take questions. Okay, I see one question on the chat. It is, according to the Hindus, we say that a person who, one second. For some reason, I cannot put this on the screen. Okay, anyway, I will stop sharing. So for some reason, okay, no. According to the Hindus, we say that a person who dies on Vaikuntha Ekadashi doesn't take transmigration because they reach the lotus feet of the Lord Vishnu directly. So let me open the new Jamboard because this Jamboard is full. Okay, so I think this question was posted to everyone. So I think you have permission to post to everyone, which is fine. Okay. So the question is, if somebody dies on Vaikuntha Ekadashi, he goes to the spiritual world. Okay, and then there is no and doesn't have to go through transmigration, or basically one has been liberated. What is the meaning of that? So hidden in this question is a different question, which I have heard this question many times, not specifically about Vaikuntha Ekadashi, but in different forms. But the essence is the following, that we are talking about this long practice of developing or giving up our material attachments and so on, and the process of yoga or jnana yoga or bhakti, whatever it may be. And then just by doing, or just by properly timing the death on Vaikuntha Ekadashi day, one can go out of the material world. So it's like hitting the jackpot. Why do I have to work so hard to become a millionaire when I can go and win a lottery and become a millionaire? So this is like a lottery, but a planned lottery. If I plan my death on a particular day, then I will be liberated. What is the need for doing all this lifelong practice? So that is the hidden part in the question. So I want to address this at many levels. Okay. So first of all, let me write down here. Let me share my screen now. And please listen very carefully. And a lot of, when I said I'm answering one question, use your intelligence to apply the answer to other questions of a similar nature. Okay. So don't just see that, oh, this is just a question about dying on Vaikuntha Ekadashi day. That's all, nothing else. Please don't think with a very narrow scope. So I want to talk about Ekadashi, or in general, what is the meaning of fasting or vratas? Vrata. Then we talk about doing vratas versus lifelong practice of yoga. Whether it could be Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, there can be many forms of yoga. So doing lifelong practice of yoga. And then I want to talk about yoga practice via vratas versus bhakti. Okay, yoga practice through vrata and through bhakti. These are two methods of living your life, or practice of yoga. Which one is better and what are the results? I want to talk about all these things. Okay, so first, in general, let us talk about what is the meaning of Ekadashi Vrata. Ekadashi Vrata, or any Vrata for that matter, we 99%, yes, I was doing some Google searches. Yes, this question was asked yesterday also, but we couldn't get to it. So I'm very thankful this person asked it today. Ekadashi Vrata, I was doing some Google. There are a lot of even ISKCON websites. 99% of those websites just talk about what you should eat. Don't eat grains, don't eat rice, don't eat wheat. It is okay to eat paneer. It is okay to eat, milk products, fruits. And even there are 35, 40 recipes, that wonderful recipes that you can make with all the items that are not grains. And of course, no meat, fish, eggs, obviously, but not even grains, no rice, no kheer, no chapati, no roti, nothing. They all talk about fasting as eating. That is such a small, narrow view of what it means. What is Ekadashi? It is such a narrow view. And I am disappointed that these ISKCON websites, also many of them, don't talk about anything else except for what you eat, as if eating is the only thing that matters in life. Let's see what Srila Prabhupada is talking about Ekadashi Vrata. And not only Srila Prabhupada, this is coming from Sri Rupa Goswami. So this is, we go back to our orientation session, who is Rupa Goswami, and all that. And I had said we recite this verse, Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. We are all the followers of Rupa Goswami. Everybody who is in ISKCON or follower of Srila Prabhupada is a follower of Sri Rupa Goswami, because Srila Prabhupada has done nothing else other than sharing the philosophy of Rupa Goswami, who has done nothing else but sharing the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself. So let us see what Rupa Goswami is saying in his most wonderful literature called Nectar of Devotion. This is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu about Ekadashi. So we go to chapter 7, and I will search for the word Ekadashi here. Okay, observing fasting on Ekadashi. There's a small paragraph, and I will just read that paragraph. You all can see the screen? Yes? Screen is visible? Yes. Okay. In the Brahma Vaivarta Puran, it is said that one who observes fasting on Ekadashi is freed. So we are just talking about fasting. Just fasting. No dying, no Vaikuntha Ekadashi, but just fasting. So I'm just generalizing. So in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, it is said that one who observes fasting on Ekadashi is freed from all kinds of reactions to sinful activities and advances in pious life. So just by fasting, you are freed from all reactions. But the question is, what is the meaning of fasting? Just eating paneer and watching Netflix, is that fasting? Oh, I fasted. Did you fast on Ekadashi? Yes. What did you do? I had paneer sabji with quinoa. And what else did you do? I watched 10 movies on Netflix, Amitabh Bachchan movies. That is not fasting. So what is fasting? Here Srila Prabhupada is writing, the basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda or Sri Krishna. The real reason for observing fasting on Ekadashi is to minimize the demands of the body and to engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. The best thing to do on fasting days is to remember the pastime. Pastime means the Leela, the stories, the Katha of Govinda, and to hear his name, holy name constantly. That is the meaning of fasting, not just eating paneer and sabudana and watching Netflix. That is not fasting. This is fasting, what is written on the screen. So the purpose of saying don't eat grains is so that you don't have to cook. There is a concept in, you all know the concept of fast food, right? When I say fast food, what comes to mind? McDonald's. That's what comes to my mind also. Fast food means McDonald. In Vedic times also there is fast food. Anybody knows what is Vedic fast food? What is Vedic?
Is it
Chevda.
fruits?
Chevda, fruits.
Fruits. Yes. I thought somebody said chivda. Chivda is not, it is grains, but fruits. And one more nice thing is there. Definitely fruits plus
Water.
and one more,
Tulsi water.
and one more
Leaves.
Nuts.
Milk and curds also.
huh?
Kandamula roots.
Okay, what else?
Curd.
You are missing. Somebody said curd, so I will say milk products. Okay, so
Yes,
fruit
yes.
and milk, that is Vedic fast food. Okay, it doesn't mean you open your kitchen and do elaborate preparation of some paneer sabji or some, what is that? क्या बनाते हैं वो डोसा किस चीज का? Kutu pakoras, kutu dosha, buckwheat and this and that. It is more work than your normal cooking of rice and dal. That is not the purpose. The purpose is to be free from the kitchen, be free from cooking, be free from this. Just you need something to eat. You can eat fruits and milk, no cooking needed. And focus on remembering Krishna. That is the purpose. Like when you go for vacation, you go to fast food restaurant because the purpose is so that you can maximize your sightseeing. You don't want to sit in the restaurant for 3 hours. So you go pick up the fast food so that you can quickly eat and spend your time in sightseeing. That is why on vacation trips, sightseeing trip, many people do fast food. So it is for a purpose. That is the meaning of Ekadashi and fasting. It is not just about what you eat. That is a small part. If you tell somebody, I went to vacation in Yellowstone, what did you do? I went to McDonald's. Like what? That's all you did? That's the only meaningful thing you did in Yellowstone, going to McDonald's? So that is just so stupid. So this is the real meaning of fasting. Now let us come to the next point, which is, so I know I'm giving a long answer and there are probably more questions, so I should probably shorten the answer. Doing vrata versus the lifelong practice of yoga. In the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when we will come to the 8th chapter, we will see all the processes of yoga and when to die and how to die. That is going to be covered in detail in the 8th chapter. But I will just trust me, in the 8th chapter towards the end, Lord Krishna is talking about I'll just summarize this verse number 26. In the Vedic opinion, when one passes away from this world in light, There are two ways of passing away from this world, in light and in darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back, but when one passes in darkness, he returns. And then before that, Lord Krishna is talking earlier about how the mystic yogis, they time their death in such a way so that they can attain liberation. But later on, he says that although devotees, the bhakta, know these two paths, they are never bewildered. Therefore, always be fixed in devotion. Lord Krishna is saying, don't worry about how to die, when to die. You should just do my bhakti. Then I will take care that I take you back to spiritual world. You don't have to do it all by your own effort. So you have to, yes, by your yoga, by your strength of your own yoga, you can plan to die on a certain day with a certain consciousness. It's not just about dying on a certain day, but having a certain mental consciousness as well at the time of dying. Just because you died on Vaikuntha Ekadashi watching Netflix does not mean. It also means that the consciousness need to be present. That part is missed. In the Padma Puran, it is mentioned about when to die, how to die, but it also says the consciousness that you have to have on that day. So the day is important. It's not just the day of death that is important. It is the consciousness also that is important. People just promote this part. That day you come to the temple, you give donation, you do this, you will be happy. They are all cheaters. They don't tell you this part because this part is hard. Okay? So you have to have the proper consciousness and you have to time your death. Then yes. Otherwise, no. Okay? So that is, this consciousness comes through practice. Just like Olympics, recently the Olympics have concluded. Okay? How much practice the gold medalists have to do lifelong. So there is lifelong, or I will say many years of practice you have to do. Plus you have to perform well on that day, on that specific day. Both have to be there. You have to do this, plus you have to perform well on that day. I, who have never thrown a javelin in my life, I cannot just show up on the Olympic field and say that on that day I will be able to throw it. No, I have to do the practice. Only then I have to do it. I can hope to achieve it on that day. There are many great athletes who have done this, but failed to perform it on that day. Go Google a very famous name called Sergey. Anybody knows the last name who I'm talking about? Very famous, example of this situation. Sergey, you don't know? No problem. Bubka. He is from the Soviet Union. He's a pole vaulter. Pole vaulter. He broke his own world record 35 times. He was the best pole vaulter ever in history. And the second one was a far second. He was like the undisputed champion ever. His gold medal in the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona was assured. Everybody else was competing for silver medal because gold medal was reserved for this guy. He was just the champion. And of course, he did tremendous amount of practice for many, many years. You know what happened in the Olympic final? He didn't even qualify for the final. He just failed on that one day. On that one day, he failed. It happens. And it can happen with a yogi as well. There is so many examples in scriptures. There is example of Bharat Maharaj. And we can talk about it in the Srimad Bhagavatam classes that we do. Okay. So the yogi has to plan his death. And that planning can come after year-long or lifelong practice. And plus he has to get it right on that day. But Lord Krishna is saying a devotee does not have to care about all these things. You just do devotion. Even if you forget me, even if you cannot plan properly, I will plan it for you. I will do everything for you. Okay? Even if the devotee forgets Krishna at the time of death, Krishna will remember the devotee. So this is the answer. So just planning to die on Vaikuntha Ekadashi is the wrong understanding. It has to die. One has to die with the right consciousness, and that definitely comes through the practice of yoga. But if one performs bhakti yoga, then one does not have to worry about any of this. Just like Lord Krishna is saying that in verse number 27, devotees know these paths of dying, but they don't have to worry because I take care. He says here in the next verse, a person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of all the other paths of jnana, dhyana, and all those other paths. Bhakti is superset. You just do bhakti and Krishna takes care of the rest. Okay, so that's the sort of the long answer to the nice question. I hope that has satisfied this person who asked the question. Next question. So which question is that? I don't have that question. Can you ask them to post it again? Then there is another, is anybody raising a hand? I don't see anybody raising hand. Okay, no problem. There are a lot of questions on the chat and I will go through these ones quicker. There is one doubt I have. If the Jivatma within us is the permitter, then why it gives permission to doing wrong things? So first of all, Jivatma is not the one who is the permitter. I said Paramatma is the permitter. So just a small correction. Okay. Paramatma is the permitter. There are both in the body, Jivatma and Paramatma. And Paramatma is the permitter. This other bird, we gave the example of two birds. One bird is busy enjoying, the other bird is watching, and that other bird is Paramatma, and he is the permitter. So the permitter, the question is, why does the permitter permit doing wrong things or bad things? That is, I'll give a short answer and we will discuss this in Bhagavad Gita classes more in detail. But permission concept is, yes, the Lord always guides. Guidance is always given by the Paramatma, but the soul or the Jiva always has a free will plus some independence to execute the free will. So it is like a father, you know, whenever the child does something good, let's say he studied well, father says, okay, I will give you $5 today because you did study, you did good amount of study. That is like when you do punya karma, you get the credits, punya credits, pious credits. So you keep accumulating your pious credits. Okay. And with those credits, you can have any kind of desire, any kind of free will. You need to also have the credits to be permitted to execute it. Just like the child is doing good things. Okay. And then when he has got $50, the child says, oh, now I want to buy a toy. Father says, okay, you can buy the toy. Now he cannot say, I want to buy a car even though he has been a good child, but he only has $50. You cannot buy a car in $50. So in the same way, we can do punya karma, but if we say to God, I want to go to Swargaloka and enjoy in Swarga, no, you cannot. You need to have more pious credit. You have to accumulate more. But if you say to Krishna, just, let me get a good job. Okay, if you have done pious credits, you will get a good job. You will get a good wife, a good husband, a good child, whatever may be, whatever is, how much ever punya you have accumulated, you can get. But with those past credits, you can always also misuse it. Like a child can say to the father, I want to buy a pack of cigarette. Then father will give guidance. No, that's not good for you. Child will say, no, I want it. I want it. That is where the free will comes. And if he has $50, in $50, you can buy a cigarette. So ultimately, the father will say, okay, you go buy. Reluctantly, he will permit, because the child has obtained those pious credits. Now, if the child says, I want to buy a bottle of, I don't know what is the most expensive whiskey. I don't drink whiskey, but somebody can tell me. I have heard whiskey bottle may cost $1,000, some old whiskey. I don't know. He says, I want this bottle of champagne or whiskey. Father will say, no, neither do I permit. It's my guidance that you don't get it. Plus, I will not permit because you don't even have the credits. So he cannot get it. But if somebody has attained enough credits, has accumulated enough credits, he can misuse it. And as long as his misuse is within the domain of how much he can misuse, then father says, okay, you want to misuse? Go, and then you will suffer. You will attain the, like yesterday we were talking, child is saying, I want to put my hand in the fire. I want to put my hand in the fire. Father will say, no, no, no. Ultimately, will say, okay. The only way you will learn is by doing it, experiencing it, and then learning from the hard, let's say, like it is say, learning the hard way. So I hope that question is answered, that why does God permit? So God ultimately does permit. He provides guidance, but he does give the free will for the living entity, for the jiva. That is, otherwise there's no free will. If the God says, I will not permit anything bad, what is the meaning of that freedom? I had explained, I think in one of the classes, that's like Ford saying, you can have any color car you want as long as it is black. That is like giving a choice with one option. That's not a choice. That is a force. Choice means you have to have both options or more. I can do good things, I can do bad things. I can do misuse or I can do good use. That is a choice. And God gives us the choice, but limited choice. Some independence to execute it, to how much credits we have accumulated. Okay. So I hope that makes it fairly clear. I think I answered from all the angles, this point of how God permits, why he permits, and to what extent the permission is allowed. But everything comes from his permission. Bhagwan ke chahe bina ek patta bhi nahi hilta. A leaf also doesn't move without his permission. That is 100% correct. But he does allow to the extent we are entitled or we have earned. Okay, great. Very nice. Next question. I will take this question from yesterday. The kind of feelings, what I meant was the kind of feelings that are generated in one due to the attitude and behavior of the other person. We or I are quite sensitive towards the behavior of others, and this sensitivity many a times leads to sadness and sorrow, whereas less sensitive people do not get affected in the same manner. This may be oversensitivity, which I need to bring down, but how? Aha. So now I understand the question better. And this question is about being a sensitive person. And sometimes this being a sensitive person leads to sadness. Oh, too many S's. So it leads to sadness. Okay. And so this person is asking, should I become a less sensitive person? And I will turn those words a little bit. When he says less sensitive, I will say, should I become a hard-hearted person? Another term that is used by many people is thick-skinned person. Should I become a thick-skinned person? Okay. Now again, there is nothing black and white. All these are just English words: hard-hearted, thick-skinned, etc. Developing a thick skin is a little bit different than becoming hard-hearted. So in general, please hear carefully. Being a sensitive person, on the contrary, a soft-hearted person is considered a good quality, a good Vaishnava quality. Good or devotees, bhakta of Bhagwan are soft-hearted and they are very sensitive. But the problem here is that sadness, this link is the problem. How can I highlight this? This link, which is being shown here, that link is the problem. Being soft-hearted is not the problem, but there is some attachment. Oh, I want people to praise me. I don't want people to blame me or say bad things, whatever may be the case. And then you get affected because you are sensitive and you become sad. So the attachment is to something else, that I want something. That is what should be minimized or eliminated. Not that you become hard-hearted. Bolo jo bolna hai, bolte raho, I don't care. Keep talking whatever you talk. I have a thick skin. I have a hard heart. Then you are becoming less. That is not a good devotional quality. Devotees are very, very soft-hearted, very sensitive, but they are not attached. So in that sense, you can say that they are thick-skinned. You can say that because it doesn't affect a devotee. A true bhakta doesn't get affected if you tell them that, oh, you are so poor, you are such a fool. Bhakta will say, yes, I am a fool. Please tell me, how to become more intelligent. Now, it doesn't mean that some idiot will tell them how to become intelligent and they will follow it. No, they won't follow it, but that is just a action of humility. I'm so sorry for being a fool. It doesn't affect them one bit. They know their true attachment and their true connection with God. And they are following Shastra. As long as they are following Shastra and what is written in the Shastra, and they are following the instructions of the Guru and Shastra, they don't need any other instruction. But at heart, they are very sensitive. They are very soft-hearted, very humble. So being sensitive is a good thing, but being affected by other people's judgments, that is something you should cut. So this link you should cut. You should not cut this and become hard-hearted. No, that's the wrong thing. You should never say, I will become hard-hearted. Stay sensitive. Look what leads to sadness. And 100% it will be some material attachments, some craving for acknowledgement by others. People should acknowledge me. They should say good things, whatever. You should give up that attachment and you should think, how will Krishna acknowledge me? Am I a good bhakta, a good devotee, so that Krishna will praise me? My guru will praise me. A genuine guru, by the way, not a fraud guru. That should be the craving, not how my neighbor or how my boss or how my other, material friends should judge me. One should not care much about that. And therefore, there will be no sadness. I hope I answered that question. Okay, so you in a complete way, these are all the points I wanted to mention. I hope this person is fully satisfied with this answer. So let me go back up. Manjunath has a hand raised. What is the question?
Yeah, Guruji. I heard, I read somewhere, there's a 3 ways for liberation or self-realization. That is, one says that there is a karma marga, bhakti marga, and yoga marga. So can you throw some light on that, and what is the difference between that? Because I ultimately heard that all 3 leads to one if they do it properly. But just wanted to understand what is the difference between 3 and karma marga, bhakti marga, and yoga marga.
Okay, so all those terms are a little bit confusing the way you kind of structured it. You kind of have a very loosey-goosey understanding, but not a precise understanding. So there are 4 processes as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. All those are yoga. You said karma marga, bhakti marga, and yoga. Those are the 3 things you said. That is kind of all mixed up, confused, khichdi. They are all yoga. Okay. Everything is yoga. Yoga means connecting to the Supreme. That is yoga. And there are 4 ways mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Karma yoga is mentioned in chapter 3. Jnana yoga is mentioned in chapter 4. Dhyana yoga is mentioned in chapter 6. And bhakti yoga is mentioned in chapter 7 to 12. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, all those lead to liberation. But some are easy and some are hard. We will cover all these things in great detail, as you can see, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So whoever is asking this question, please, that's how much I will tell you. Now, if I start telling you what is the difference, which one is easy, which one is hard, what is the better one, what is this and that, you are basically asking me to tell Bhagavad Gita from chapter 3 to chapter 12 in 5 minutes. Okay, that is not possible. But I have given you enough to make you satisfied today. Over the next several months, it will become more clear. Fair?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one question more we will take and we will move on. So I can see there are more questions, and the trick is you post your questions sooner. Then I know how to time myself. Okay, otherwise all the time is spent in answering like the first question, or because I don't know how many more questions are there. So I try to give a more detailed, more elaborate answer. So if there are more questions that come up in the beginning itself, then I can tackle them in a proper, timely way. So that is why it is very important to put your questions down in the beginning. So somebody else is also asking this question. Nothing happens without God permission. Bhagwan ki marzi ke bina patta bhi nahi hilta. If so, then does it mean God maintain equilibrium of good and bad things? I think I have, and like matter, antimatter is going way into very all kinds of areas, but I think I already answered that question fully. So please focus on the answer that I gave, and that is the answer to this question as well. When does materialism become a hindrance in the path of spirituality? That's the last question by somebody. When does materialism become a hindrance in the path of spirituality? Answer is always. Always. Materialism or material attachments are always a hindrance. The trick is to convert those material attachments into spiritual attachments. Just as an example, so of course, material attachments are always a hindrance. If you are too much attached to money, then you cannot be attached to spiritual progress. There is a very beautiful verse in Bhagavad Gita 2.44, very important verse. It will come up in chapter 2. Let us see what it says. I will not read the Sanskrit in the interest of time. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and those who are bewildered by such things, bewildered means just crazy, just, passionate, and, nothing else they can think. The resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. So you must reduce your material hankering, material attachments, and replace it with devotion to God. Now, it doesn't mean one should give up his wife, his children, no. But you make your family members also devotional, and then you can live like a group of devotees together. Such a nice thing, such a nice way to have a family life. There are so many examples in Shastra who are grihastha, but they did not have to give up family life. Arjun himself is a grihastha. Till the end, he remained grihastha. He's great devotee of Lord. And recently we discussed in our Srimad Bhagavatam series about Ambarish Maharaj. He and his wife together were doing devotional service of Lord Narayana. So as long as the whole family is devotional, you don't have to give up the family. But if one family member is saying, chalo nightclub chalenge, daru piyenge, maja karenge, and the other person is saying, nahi, I have to do bhakti, then there is a problem. But if both are aligned, you can stay together and keep making progress. Okay. So in that sense, material, you don't have to take it as absolute. Oh, material means now I have to go to the forest. No. It is about the consciousness of being attached to sense enjoyment. That is always a hindrance. Material sense enjoyment. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talks about three primary sense enjoyments: Dhanam, Janam, and Sundarim. Dhana means money, Janam means power or popularity or fame, and Sundarim means sex, opposite gender. And we also talk about it. You go to any, these sort of talks, money, power, sex. Those are the three primary drivers of all sense enjoyment in this world. Dhanam, Janam, Sundarim. Okay. So I think we covered all the questions that came today. There is one question which says, it's already 11:04 and I want to end very soon. So all remaining questions, if there are any, we will take next time. So I don't want to violate our time. I want to honor everybody, respect time. So yes, we will end here and we will take questions. Please keep coming to these sessions, asking the questions, and post your questions. I know there were few questions that were in the contact form. Please post your questions there. I will take them up in the main class. That's why I also ask which class will you come to, so that I will answer it in that particular forum. So the questions that came there were all from main class. I will take it up in the main class. And post your questions early. Watch the recordings if you missed it, and then come prepared with your questions. And most importantly, please make sure you're getting our communication. Make sure you're part of the WhatsApp, you're getting the emails, and that way you are always informed and up to date of all the classes, and you don't forget to join. And if you forget to join, watch the recording. So please do this and keep making progress in spiritual life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.